Financial Survival Network, helping you to survive and thrive in the new economy. Get our complimentary newsletter at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. This is the Financial Survival Network.
You are listening to the financialsurvivalnetwork.com. I'm Kerry Lutz, 1230 WBZT. Well, looks like the precious metals markets are getting ready to take off once again, in spite of all the naysayers. Gold is dead, long live gold. And when you're talking about gold, you're talking about precious metals. You got to talk with James Turk, founder, chairman of goldmoney.com. James, welcome back to the Financial Survival Network.
Thank you very much, Kerry.
So explain to me what the heck has been going on for the past 2 years. There are those who would like you to believe that gold was on a tear for 12 years and silver as well, and it's just taking a breather. Others would like you to believe there were nefarious schemes afoot just to keep it down, to jack up confidence in the failing fiat money system. I'm kind of leaning towards conspiracy theories myself, but what's your take on it?
Well, gold is up 12 years in a row, which is very, very unusual. And so far this year it's down, but we still have 4 months to go. And I'm willing to bet that we're going to close this year up as well, which would mean something above $16.75 per ounce. What we've had was a correction. We've seen these corrections before, Kerry. We had a deep correction back in 2008. This was a correction that was basically comparable to the 2008 correction. And so if we look back what happened then after the low was reached in 2008, we saw gold within 12 months make a new record high over what was back then a record, $1,000 an ounce. So my thinking is that, within 12 months of this low that we've just made here this summer in gold, we're going to see gold at a new record over $2,000 an ounce because the underlying fundamentals haven't changed. That's the key.
And when you say underlying fundamentals, meaning the money printing binge that the Western central banks have been on, nothing's changed there. And I look and I say, I'm just amazed the whole thing has gone on as long as it has. But then I look at real estate and it's going up again. And yeah, it's taken a little breather, but people are buying this stuff. And I say, I think they're crazy, but they're doing it.
Well, it's a way of exiting out of paper, a way of exiting out, avoiding all of this money printing. When you look at wealth, it comes in two forms. It comes in real assets, and it comes in paper assets. Tangible assets are not based on anyone's promise. If you own a farmland, that's going to produce regardless what happens to the monetary system. If you have an oil well, that's going to produce oil regardless what happens to the monetary system. But if you have money in a bank account, you're relying on someone's promise, counterparty risk. And, you say the money printing is a reason to buy gold, which it is, but now we have another reason to buy gold, given what's happened in Cyprus earlier this year, what they call a bail-in, where depositors actually lose money when they have it on deposit in the banking system and the banks go under. And given the fragility of banks around the world today, in the States as well as in Europe and even to a certain extent in Asia, and particularly in China, bail-ins, there are going to be more bail-ins coming. And so how do you avoid a bail-in? You get out of paper and get into real things. Even real estate is better off than having money in a bank account, assuming it's a real estate that has some useful purpose. It's a house where you can live in. It's a farmland where you can grow crops. It's timberland where it will produce wood every 20 years. So these are the types of things that I think people have to look at, given the uncertainties that we have in the monetary situation today worldwide.
Even seashells are looking like a useful alternative. You can make artwork out of them, I guess.
Yeah, maybe so.
Well, it just shocks me how long the system can go on, though, how long they can keep it going. That's the amazing thing, that the will to keep the system going is so strong, and the ability to, I guess, brainwash the masses into believing it, that's the shocking part.
Well, it's easier to believe something that you read in the newspaper than it is to go out and do a lot of diligent work and make a decision on your own. And to a certain extent, that's understandable. People have their lives to lead. They have a job. They've got kids. They've got bills to pay, and they want a little bit of entertainment in their lives as well. So it takes a lot of extra perseverance to go out and analyze what's going on and make some decisions about what's going on. But we all have to do this. We all have to do things that, given that the future is uncertain, we have to prepare for it. We all have to go out and do things that best we can to prepare for this uncertain future, so that we sleep well at night, knowing that ourselves and our families are protected, come what may.
Well, last month, maybe it was June in China, they actually their credit markets seized up, and they actually went to ATM machines and couldn't get cash out of it. And a few months ago, James, I had to go to the courthouse here in sunny South Florida, and I'd taken to carrying a couple of silver eagles with me just for the heck of it, because people had asked me what I did, and I would it was kind of just a prop. And he said, "Those are some interesting looking coins." So I said, well, let's do a little experiment. And I said, well, that's for the day when you go to the ATM and you stick your card in and it doesn't work. And this court officer looked at me like I was from China, and thinking the guy's out of his mind. And yet, there they were in China. Their ATM cards weren't working, except more and more the average Chinese people have gold locked away or buried or wherever they keep it.
I'll tell you another interesting story about those little silver coins you were carrying. I remember as a young boy growing up in Ohio back in the 1950s, my parents could drive the family car into the local gas station and fill it up with $2 silver. You can't do that with $2 paper dollars anymore, but if you drive into a gas station with $2 silver or $2 silver eagles, you can still have enough money in those silver coins to fill up your tank of gas in the family car.
Yeah, very true. And but they don't teach history anymore in high schools in the United States, or they teach a different version of it, and little facets like you're referring to really don't make any difference. They're considered unimportant, and those who fail to learn lessons of history, well, all that, and not worth repeating here, because we're doomed to repeat it over and over again until maybe we learn something. But look, in Europe, and this is the interesting thing, because the perceived strength of the dollar rests upon the weakness of the euro and so many other currencies. You're in Europe, you're at the epicenter of everything that's going on. Now the Spanish want Gibraltar, the Argentinians want the Falklands. What's going on in the world here, James?
It's a standard political maneuver. When the economy is bad, and you have to remember that unemployment in Spain is 27%. That's the official number. The youth unemployment in Spain is 56%, and that's the official number. The unofficial numbers may be even higher. But the standard political maneuver is, when the economy is bad, you divert people's attention. So do some saber rattling over taking over Gibraltar is probably one of the only alternatives that the Spanish leaders have to divert attention. Not only they're diverting attention from a bad economy, but there have been a lot of scandals about slush funds in Spain and whether the prime minister participated or didn't participate in these slush fund payments. So, it's just politics as usual when they do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and why am I not surprised? And then you look in Argentina, and they might as well just do away with their currency, because every 10 years it's going to be done away with anyway through hyperinflation and the action of the market. And maybe there's a lesson in Argentina for the rest of the world that poor economic policies and just reckless spending and whatever else they're doing there is destined to failure.
Yeah, I was in Argentina in 1991 specifically to study what I thought was a developing hyperinflation back then. I went there in May, and the currency, which was called the Austral, had been tied to the U.S. dollar until January of 1991. It was 14 Australs to one U.S. dollar. When I arrived in May, it had already started devaluing, and it was 64 Australs to one U.S. dollar. By the end of the week, when I left Buenos Aires, it was 96 Australs to one U.S. dollar. By December, it was 10,000 Australs to one U.S. dollar. That's how quickly hyperinflation really takes off. And this is the concern I have for most Western countries, Kerry, that we are heading toward hyperinflation because government deficits continue, and central banks are trying to paper over those government deficits by creating all of this money printing. That's going to show up in the inflation numbers sooner or later. And maybe it's starting to show up now with gold price starting to rise and an interest rate on the 10-year T-note. Even though the Fed's in there buying $80 billion of paper every month, the 10-year T-note interest rate is continuing to rise. It's 2.71% as we speak.
Yeah, and what is that telling you, that the rates are rising in spite of the Fed's actions to keep it down?
It's that, the Fed is losing control, which is going to happen sooner or later anyway, because the market is always bigger than any government or even any group of governments acting in concert. It's just a reality that the markets are bigger, and for a period of time, the Fed thinks it can control the market between its actions and its various announcements, which typically have a propagandist aspect to them. But ultimately, the markets take over when they no longer believe the promises coming out of the Fed. And I think that's what the rise in interest rates here is telling us at the moment.
And we're going to talk more about that and the departure of Ben Bernanke on the FinancialSurvivalNetwork.com with James Turk. Jason Hartman has helped thousands of people realize their dreams of financial independence through real estate investing. And now he's got an unbeatable offer for you. He's offering you his proven course that thousands have used to build an income property empire, and it's free to the first 100 Financial Survival Network listeners. Just go to jasonhartman.com/Lutz and sign up today. For cash flow and capital appreciation, there's nothing else like it. Make your money work as hard as you do by building an income property empire. Real estate is America's proven investment. Go to jasonhartman.com/Lutz and get your free course today. That's Jason, HARTMAN.com/Lutz. Thousands have paid nearly $300 for this course, but for this short period of time, you can get it free. And we are back on the FinancialSurvivalNetwork.com with James Turk talking about the Federal Reserve, their seeming loss of their omnipotence. And James, so we got a situation where Bernanke's going. So do you think there's any way that they're going to alter their policies at this point to welcome his successor with a potential calamity or the beginnings of a collapse?
I think they're going to just try the same thing that they've been trying all along, which is, more debt and more debt and more debt. So it really doesn't matter to me, who's appointed, because he or she's going to be following, I think, the same policies, going forward. But, the Fed and more generally the federal government has gone to the well too many times, and the well is dry. The policies aren't going to be working the way they have. That's why they're still running these huge deficits despite all of this money printing that the Federal Reserve has been doing. The economy is weak. Unemployment is still very high. They show unemployment improving not because the economy is strengthening, but because they take out of the unemployment numbers the people who are no longer working, looking for work, which I think is a terrible distortion. And if you look at private economists' estimate of what the unemployment rate is in the United States, using methods that the government used to use before they made all of their fancy adjustments to the numbers, it's closer to 22 or 23% unemployment. Another factor that I look at, Kerry, is that real income, to the average American, if you adjust even by the government's own numbers, real income has been declining since the mid 1970s. So it's understandable why middle class America is feeling more and more pressure. The standards of living are declining because the purchasing power of the currency is being debased. Economic activity is weak and not robust like it used to be years ago or decades ago. And a lot of families have resorted to borrowing to try to maintain their standard of living, but ultimately that's really not a solution. That's just more of a problem. So it is a tough situation at the moment.
Yeah, that just guarantees a trip to the bankruptcy court. And I don't remember, what was that event that happened right around the beginning of the 70s? I think that had something to do with it?
Yeah, it surely did. 1971, that's when President Nixon broke the dollar's formal link to gold. And if you look at on the YouTube, you can see the video of his announcement, August 15, 1971. He said that he's instructing Treasury Secretary Benson, who was the secretary at the time, or no, excuse me, Connolly.
Connolly, right? John Connolly. Yeah.
He was saying that he was asking him to quote suspend temporarily, unquote, the dollar convertibility into gold. Well, here we are, 42 years later. That temporary suspension has been pretty long, but the real impact is the fact that by eliminating the discipline on the money creation process, which is what gold has done throughout its 5,000 years of history, by eliminating that discipline, you basically gave the government a free hand to borrow as much as it wants and print as much as it wants and spend as much as it wants. And what we're dealing with today are the consequences. And the sad thing about this, Kerry, is it really shouldn't have happened, because after the War of Independence, the first currency of this country was the Continental. And the Continental collapsed for essentially the same problems that the U.S. is now facing. There was too much government spending, and as a consequence, the currency hyperinflated, the Continental hyperinflated. And one of the reasons why the framers created, as they said in the preamble to the Constitution, a more perfect union was to create a common market with a common currency. And that common currency was the dollar, which at the time was a silver dollar. It converted to a gold dollar by an act of Congress in 1900. And what we've seen in the 20th century was moving further and further away from sound money. It happened first in 1933, when Roosevelt confiscated gold from Americans and made it illegal to own it until it was reestablished. Legality of ownership was reestablished back in 1974. But the damage was finally done in 1971 when the formal link between gold and dollars was broken. So the tragedy of all of this, Kerry, is that by abandoning the wisdom of the framers, abandoning what's required in the Constitution for sound money, Article 1, Section 8 and 10, we're basically going to have to relive history, go through the same problems that the framers went through back in the 1780s when the Continental collapsed.
Yeah, and that's where that term not worth a continental came from, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we learned about in our school books as kids. Whether they still teach that in school books today, I don't know. But not worth a continental was the reason that we learned that sound money was necessary.
And unfortunately, our great-grandchildren will one day be learning not worth a dollar. And
maybe we might be learning not worth a dollar the way things are going, to be quite honest. We are on an edge. The situation is very precarious. The banks are still too highly leveraged. The government is still spending too much money. The Federal Reserve is printing too much money. And these things are very, very worrying to me. And the logical response to that is people have to buy physical gold, physical silver, just as a precaution in case the system does fall apart, in case the wheels come off the cart, and there are problems as a consequence.
Yeah, there's a certain inevitability to it all, because how did they just stop in midstream? I don't see how they can do it. I really don't see how it's going to happen.
What it's going to take is someone with a vision, like Ron Paul had.
Mm-hmm.
We did this once before, after the Civil War, and they were using greenbacks, which was the paper money at the time, and the problems that were created as a result of inflation back then. The politicians had the foresight and said, well, we want to go back to gold. How are we going to do it? And they had a 10-year plan. It was called the Gold Resumption Act. And 10 years later, because of the plan and following it closely, they did go back to a gold standard. So, I mean, it's not impossible. We're heading toward a cliff. We can turn the car around, or the ship of state around, and head back in the right direction. But it's going to take leadership and political will to do it.
Two scarce commodities that really are in tight supply now. And I could even point you post-World War I when, who was it, ran on the platform of what this country needs is a good 5-cent cigar, because cigars had gone up to 10 cents. Inflation post-World War I, prices had doubled, and I guess it was Harding ran on that platform of bringing prices back down and bringing the World War I inflation back under control. Coolidge kind of followed through on that promise after Harding died, and we did see it effectively twice in the history of the country. So, I just don't see the leadership in place to really bring this about, though. I just don't see any Jeffersons on the horizon who have the stomach for the political process to really make this a reality, James. Who in their right mind wants to get into that cesspit of the political system?
Yeah, you're right, but the old saying is, always hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. And so we can hope, but the way to prepare, of course, is to own, real assets, own farmland, own oil wells, own mines, own timberland, own gold and silver, and avoid those types of assets that are based on someone else's promise, particularly currencies which are prone to inflation, and presently, banks where the assets on the balance sheet are losing value because the banks were over leveraged. They made a lot of bad loans, and in a period of weak economic activity, those bad loans are coming home to haunt them. Yeah,
yep, it seems that way, and it's just remarkable that the banks have been bailed out and held on and are seemingly prospering at the present time. But how real that is, that I have a feeling we're going to find out in the not too distant future. James, and by the way, your educational site there on Gold Money is just outstanding. Alistair McLeod, personal friend. I read much of his work that he publishes on your site, on Gold Money Foundation. Just outstanding work.
Thank you very much, Kerry.
And goldmoney.com, check it out. A great way to purchase and hold physical without holding it in your hands. Much safer.
Exactly. And plus you have the opportunity to hold that physical in different places around the world. People in the States are always concerned about that 1933 confiscation, but they don't realize that gold that Americans held outside of the United States was not confiscated. There's no telling what could happen in the future, but that geographic diversification is always important.
Yeah, it's crucial, and you get to do that without having to travel outside the U.S. and declare all the stuff and all the things that they put you through to try to get when you're trying to get your assets outside the country. So on that note, James, thanks again for coming on the Financial Survival Network. We'll have a link to goldmoney.com. I think we've got links to it anyway, and we'll talk with you again soon. But I think you're right. I think the year and a half, 2-year correction phase of both gold and silver are behind us or will be shortly, and it's going to get exciting real fast.
Yeah, I think so. Thanks very much, Kerry.
All right, always a pleasure. Be well.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Our friend Tom Dyson at the Palm Beach Letter is giving away free copies of a really cool report he put together called How to Protect Yourself from America's New Secret Police. Inside, you'll learn all sorts of simple, everyday tricks you can use to make yourself a little less visible and vulnerable to scammers, hackers, and even the federal government. For instance, inside Tom's report, you'll learn which free internet email service never to use. This company doesn't care if your account gets hacked or not. 4 things the government must tell you if they request your social security number. And how to spot skimmers lying in wait on ATMs and gas pumps, and much, much more. These tricks and secrets are low-hanging fruit ideas. You don't have to invest time or much money into them. Most are free. But by taking some basic measures, you can make your privacy much harder to invade than your neighbors. Tom's report is available for a limited time to listeners who take a trial subscription to his newsletter. Just visit the Financial Survival Network homepage for more information, or go to www.palmbeachletter2.com. That's www.palmbeachletter2.com.
The Financial Survival Network, helping you to survive and thrive in the new economy. Get our complimentary newsletter at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. This is the Financial Survival Network.